My son suspended me until I apologized to his mother-in-law. I said all right. The next morning, she smirked until she saw my empty desk and the resignation letter waiting for her. That is what this story becomes. But it began much earlier, in a kitchen that had always belonged to me. My name is Esme Reddington. I am 64 years old. I had just finished heating water for tea when I heard the knock. It was too early for anyone, and Evan never knocked. He used to come in talking, filling my hallway with noise and stories. But that morning, he stood in the doorway like a guest who had lost the confidence to ask if he could come in. He stepped inside without removing his coat. His eyes didn't land on me, they moved around the room, searching for a safe place to settle. I knew that look. It was the same one he had when he was a boy and had practiced a speech someone else told him to say. "Mom," he began, still standing. "I need to talk to you about yesterday." I waited. My tea kettle clicked softly behind me. He swallowed. "You are suspended." The word felt strange in the air between us, like it was too large for the room, suspended from what I asked. Though I already knew, Evan only took that tone when he was trying to sound official, the way his mother-in-law liked him to, from the company. He said, "Until you apologize to Lorraine." There it was, clean, practiced, ready. A year ago, he would not have delivered that message. 5 years ago, he would have defended me before anyone had the chance to accuse me of anything, but he was no longer the boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after school. He was a man who lived in a house built on someone else's expectations. I saw him flinch when he finally looked at me, not because he regretted it, because he expected me to argue, to fight, to plead, to do anything that made this easier for him. Instead, I placed the kettle aside and said, "All right." He blinked. That's it. That's it. His relief was immediate, but beneath it, something uneasy flickered across his face. He had not rehearsed what to do if I agreed. He left soon after, still clutching his coat, still trying not to look guilty. When the door closed behind him, the quiet in the room changed. It did not feel like defeat. It felt like permission. By the time I sat at the table, my decision had begun forming, steady and certain, shaping itself into something that would lead me back through memories I had avoided for years. I knew the past would catch up before the day was over. And when it did, everything that pushed me to this moment would finally make sense. After Evan left my kitchen, I stayed seated for a long minute, hands still around the warm mug. His voice kept replaying in my head, not because of the words, but because of who he sounded like. It wasn't my son. It was Lorraine Hayes. I met her for the first time 12 years ago. At a birthday dinner Evan insisted on hosting. Back then, I was proud of him, 25 years old. Steady job, good heart. When he introduced her, she smiled at me the way people smile when they're already rearranging your place in the room. "You must be Esme," she said, taking my hand without letting me take hers. "Evan tells me you're very independent. That can be difficult for sons." "You know." Evan laughed lightly, too lightly. I let it pass. After they married, the changes came quietly. Small things, a comment here, a correction there. If I baked Evan's favorite lemon bread, she'd cut a slice, taste it, and say, "Oh, it's lovely." My mother made it differently. "But this is quaint." Evan chuckled and kissed her temple. I smiled because it was easier later, when they bought their house. I offered to help paint the nursery. She tilted her head, touched my wrist, and said, "It's sweet you want to help, but we'd like things done properly." No offense. Evan stood behind her, silent. He neither defended me nor questioned her. He simply exhaled in relief when the conversation ended. Years passed like that. Thin paper cuts nobody else saw every time she pushed. I stepped back to keep the peace. Evan started thanking her for things I used to do, listening to her version of events, letting her doubts replace his memories. The morning he suspended me wasn't sudden. It was just the first time he said aloud what the past had been shaping for years. And as I stood from the table, I knew I was done shrinking. When I walked into Bayline Technologies that morning, the building felt too bright. People at the front desk glanced up, then quickly pretended to be busy. Nobody greeted me. Nobody said my name. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like news traveled faster than you did. HR called me into the small conference room on the second floor. Evan was already there, standing stiff beside Marla from HR, both of them trying to look neutral. Lorraine Hayes lingered just outside the glass wall, ostensibly reading a poster about cybersecurity. Her intent was obvious. Marla cleared her throat, cleared her hay. Esme, we're here to formally acknowledge your suspension from Bayline Technologies effective today. Evan didn't look at me. Not once. Marla kept reading, her voice flat and rehearsed. The terms require that you complete a mediation session and issue an apology to Lorraine Hayes before reinstatement can be considered. I felt a subtle shift inside me, not loud, just precise, like a door clicking into place. I looked at Evan. This is what you wanted. He flinched. Mom, let's just follow the process. Lorraine's reflection in the glass shifted slightly. Like she leaned closer to hear, I kept my eyes on him. You're suspending me because she told you to. Mom, please don't start. He whispered. Start, Evan. I haven't even spoken. Marla stepped in quickly. Let's keep this professional. My colleagues filed past the room, eyes flicking in and out. Not daring to look directly at me, people who used to ask for my advice now acted like standing too close might pull them into the mess. Lorraine finally stepped inside the doorway, her voice sweet as syrup. We all just want harmony, Esme. I looked at her, then at Evan, then at the HR form sliding across the table. All right, I said. The word echoed in the glass room, sharp enough that even Evan looked up. And then the silence deepened, heavier than before, pressing against the walls as if the whole building had agreed to hold its breath. I closed my office door softly, the click quieter than my own breath, on the other side of the glass. The floor kept moving footsteps, voices, phones. But inside my office, everything felt suspended, like the air waited for me to decide what came next. I didn't sit. I went straight to the bottom drawer and pulled out the small box where I kept things no one else touched: my contract, my old evaluations, the notes from the negotiation I fought through almost 10 years ago. I laid the contract on my desk and smoothed the pages with my hand. Evan's voice from the meeting still echoed in my head. Mom, let's just follow the process. He forgot the process was something I built long before he learned to use it. I opened the next drawer and began pulling out pens, notebooks. The framed photo of him at 6 years old holding the wooden airplane we built together. I set it aside, then hesitated only half a second before slipping it into my bag. My phone buzzed twice, messages from coworkers asking if I was all right. I turned the screen face down. I didn't need reassurance. I needed honesty, and the room finally offered it. I looked again at my contract, the clauses I insisted on, the ones they thought I'd never invoke. All right, I whispered to no one, and just like that, the decision formed quiet, firm, and done. I stayed in my office long after most people packed up for the day. The hallway lights dimmed automatically at 6, but I didn't leave. I pulled my chair closer to the desk, opened my laptop, and began sorting through everything they thought I'd forgotten. 3 years of overtime logs, emails where I warned about resource limits, Slack threads where Lorraine barged into projects she didn't understand, compliance notes flagged in red, each one tied to a decision she pushed Evan to approve. I opened a folder labeled Q4 Retention and found the message I sent at 11:30 on a rainy Thursday night. We cannot promise a 12-week build in 4 weeks. It's not safe and it's not honest. Evan replied at 6 the next morning. Mom, let's just keep everyone calm. Lorraine thinks we can do it. I remembered sitting alone in this same room, rewriting schedules late into the night to prevent him from facing unnecessary embarrassment. I kept going. A document from 2 years ago showed I worked an extra 90 hours in 1 month to fix an error Lorraine caused during a client demo. She never admitted it. Evan never asked. As I compiled each file, the memories came back like they'd been waiting. The night Evan canceled dinner because Lorraine needed him more. The way he told me, Mom, it's easier if you don't push back. The silent expectation that I would carry the weight so his life stayed smooth. By mid-morning, the documentation packet was nearly complete, organized. Factual. Impossible to dismiss. I opened a blank document and wrote my resignation letter short, precise, final. Then I uploaded everything to the board, finance, and the partners whose contracts depended on the truth. When the progress bar reached 100%, I leaned back and let out a slow breath. The evidence was out. The story, at last, was no longer theirs to twist. I arrived early the next morning, long before the office filled. I wanted the quiet. I wanted the clean break. By 7:15, every drawer in my office was empty. Every file either taken with me or already in the board's inbox. The only thing left on the desk was my resignation letter, placed right in the center. At 7:30, I heard the unmistakable click of Lorraine's heels coming down the hallway, fast, sharp, purposeful. She didn't bother knocking. She pushed the door open forcefully, as if claiming authority over the space. Esme, she said, breath tight. We're not doing this childish silent treatment today. Evan told me you aren't answering calls. I didn't turn around. I zipped my bag slowly, letting the sound answer for me. When I finally faced her, she was already scanning the room. Her eyes darted from the bare shelves to the empty wall hooks, then to the desk. She stepped closer, her voice rising. Where is everything? Why is your office? She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the letter. It sat there like a quiet accusation. My signature in dark ink. The date. The phrase effective immediately. Her face paled. No, you didn't. I did. I said. She grabbed the letter with trembling fingers. You can't leave. Not like this. Evan never approved. It doesn't require his approval. You owe us a conversation. She snapped. I don't owe you anything. She blinked hard, as if I had slapped her with the words. You think this solves something, she whispered. You think walking away makes you look strong? I'm not walking away, I said. I'm stopping the part where I clean up after you. She drew back slightly. Just one step, but enough to show she felt it, her control slipping. A crack forming right where her confidence used to sit. In the hallway, early employees walked by cautiously, avoiding eye contact with the empty office that once held my workspace. I picked up my bag. Lorraine tried one more time. Esme, don't do this. I walked past her without answering. The game she thought she was winning had already ended. By the time I stepped out of the elevator, the building felt different. People whispered in tight circles, phones pressed to ears. The usual morning rhythm replaced by something sharp and unsettled. I didn't slow down. I headed straight for the conference room because I already knew who would be waiting. Bayline's corporate attorney, Daniel Mercer, stood near the screen with a stack of printed documents clutched to his chest. His face was the color of old paper. Evan was beside him, pacing in short, frantic steps. When he saw me, he stopped, almost startled. Daniel cleared his throat. Esme, we received your resignation and the documentation packet you submitted this morning. Good, I said. setting my bag on the table. He looked down at the papers again. Do you understand what your suspension triggered? Evan jumped in. We're trying to get ahead of this. Mom, if you'd just talk to us instead of sending things at dawn, Daniel cut him off. Evan, stop. You need to hear this. He turned to me. According to your contract, a suspension not tied to documented performance issues entitles you to full severance. That includes an immediate payout of almost $200,000, continuation of benefits, and vested shares. Evan's jaw dropped. That can't be right. You thought she'd never use it, I said. Daniel pressed a hand to his forehead. There's more. 3 clients emailed this morning before 8, questioning why they received compliance documents originating from you. They're concerned, and rightly so. Your packet highlights issues I've raised internally for over a year. Lorraine appeared behind Evan, arms folded tight. Daniel, fix it. He didn't even look at her. I can't fix what's already been sent. Evan stepped closer to me, voice cracking. Mom, you blindsided us. No, I said. I revealed what you ignored. Daniel let out a breath that sounded like surrender. If this escalates, the board will review Evan's decisions. His name is on every approval tied to these risks. Evan stared at me, realization hitting him harder than anger ever could. The damage finally had a name, his. The boardroom was already full when I walked in. Evan sat at the end of the table, shoulders tight, fingers tapping against a folder he hadn't opened. Lorraine stood behind him like a shadow with too much confidence. Daniel Mercer, the attorney, looked exhausted, and 2 board directors whispered sharply to one another until they saw me enter. No one spoke. That was new. I set my bag on the table and sat down. Evan tried first. Mom, we talked about this with HR. The suspension can be reversed. We can wipe it clean. Lorraine stepped forward. Reversed? Yes, but reinstatement should come with consequences. Accountability matters. I looked at her. You want consequences? She lifted her chin. You disrespected me. Daniel exhaled hard. Lorraine, please. One of the directors, a quiet man named Harris, leaned forward. Esme, your packet raised serious concerns. We need clarification. I provided only the facts. No interpretation. No commentary. Lorraine laughed under her breath. Facts. You're trying to tear down your own son's career? I turned to Evan. Is that what you think I'm doing? His eyes flickered guilt, fear, something he didn't want me to see. Mom, I just want this fixed. Let's sign whatever we need to. Apologize. And move on. There won't be an apology, I said. Lorraine stepped closer. You don't get to refuse. Evan is giving you a chance to come back with dignity. I held her gaze, held her. The moment he repeated your suspension, he took that chance away. Evan flinched. Mom, don't twist this. I didn't think no, I said quietly. You didn't. Daniel opened the folder Evan kept avoiding. Legally, her resignation is valid. The packet she submitted exposes non-compliance issues and puts the blame on the decisions approved under your name. Evan, this can't be undone. Lorraine's voice rose. Daniel, enough. He finally looked at her. I'm not here to protect your ego. The room went still. I slid my resignation letter across the table. Harris read the first lines, nodded once, and handed it to the second director. Evan stared at the paper like it was a weapon. Mom, please. You don't have to leave. I folded my hands. I already left. He shook his head slowly, voice breaking. I didn't think you'd really walk away. That, I said, was the problem. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of truth, landing exactly where it belonged. Of consequences they couldn't shift onto me anymore. Of a life I was no longer willing to shrink inside. Lorraine stepped back first. Then Evan lowered his eyes. Daniel closed the folder, and I stood up. By midday, the building buzzed with a different kind of noise, tight whispers, hurried footsteps, phones ringing with a nervous edge. I was packing the last box in my office when Harris from the board stepped in without crossing the doorway. A client from Redwood Systems is threatening to pull their contract. He said quietly, "They're citing the compliance gaps you flagged." I nodded once. I didn't offer comfort. Down the hall, Lorraine's voice cut through the air. "Someone fix this. I don't care what she sent, they can't just walk away." Her heels slammed against the floor, no longer confident, only frantic. 2 engineers passed my office. Eyes down. One of them muttered, "She was right. All of it." The other nodded. Glancing at my empty shelves like they were a warning, my phone buzzed in my hand. A voicemail. Evan's voice came through, unsteady. "Mom, I'm trying to understand what happened. The board wants answers. Redwood Systems blames me. I didn't think it would fall apart like this. Can we talk, please? Just call me back." I listened until the end, then let the silence settle. I didn't press play again. Instead, I closed my box, lifted it into my arms, and walked out of the office that no longer held anything I owed. The echoes behind me weren't mine anymore. They belonged to the people who created them. I met the recruiter at a small cafe in Fremont, the same place she had asked to meet me 2 years ago. Back then, I declined the offer. Evan depended on me. The team needed guidance. Loyalty had defined my purpose.
This time, she slid the offer across the table and said, "The position is yours if you want it. Esme, Director of Operations, full authority, no interference." I read it once. I didn't ask for time to think. "I'll take it," I said. She smiled. "I'm glad you finally chose yourself." After the meeting, I drove to Golden Gardens. The wind off the water was cool, steady. Families passed by, laughing, living ordinary lives untouched by the tensions I carried. I didn't sit.
I just walked slowly along the path, letting the day settle in my chest. My phone buzzed twice, Evan again. I let it ring out. I didn't owe him an explanation he wasn't ready to hear. When the sun dipped lower, I turned back toward my car, lighter than I had felt in years. No weight on my shoulders, no roles to perform, no borrowed peace. At home, I set my new contract on the counter and wrote one small note to myself on a sticky tab. This time, nothing is taken from you to keep someone else comfortable. If you're here with me at this point in the story, comment or subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.